She never suspected a thing. He was the loving husband, the man she trusted with her heart and her future. But little did she know, the man she married had been hiding a secret so deep it would change everything. Betrayal is a powerful thing, especially when it comes from the person you least expect. You won't believe the shocking truth behind this cheating story. Stick around until the end. This one's going to leave you speechless. Marissa and James had been married for 5 years. On the outside, everything looked perfect. They had the house, the job, the friends, everything that made people envy their life. James was the perfect husband. He was loving, attentive, always there for her. Marissa had no reason to doubt him. She trusted him completely. She never thought twice about the late nights he worked, the phone calls he took in private, or the sudden business trips that seemed to pop up out of nowhere. She believed in him, and that was enough for her. But there was something she didn't know, something hidden beneath the surface. James had been keeping a secret, and the lies he told were starting to pile up. It wasn't just that he was cheating, it was how deep the betrayal ran. It wasn't just about a one-night mistake or a fleeting moment of weakness. It was an affair that had been going on for months. James had met someone at work. Her name was Olivia, and she was everything Marissa was not. The chemistry was instant, something he couldn't explain but couldn't resist either. Olivia was younger, more adventurous, and seemed to give him the attention he had been craving, the excitement he felt was missing from his daily life. What started as innocent flirting soon became something deeper, an emotional connection that he couldn't ignore. But as the affair progressed, so did the guilt. James was torn between two worlds, the loving wife at home and the thrilling, secretive affair he was keeping hidden. Marissa had no idea. She had no idea that the man she trusted more than anyone was living a double life. She couldn't have known, because James was good at hiding it. He was careful with his time, careful with his phone, careful with everything that could expose the truth. But deep down, he knew he couldn't keep up the facade forever. And that scared him. Because he loved Marissa, but he didn't know how to stop what had started with Olivia. The pull was too strong. James's affair with Olivia was only one part of the secret, but it was the one that would unravel everything. The guilt weighed on him, and yet there was a part of him that didn't want to give up the thrill, the passion, the connection he found outside of his marriage. He had convinced himself that it was just an affair, something temporary, something that didn't have to affect his life with Marissa. But deep down, he knew it would. He knew it was only a matter of time before the truth came out. And when it did, there would be no going back. The trust they had built would shatter, and everything they had worked for would be lost. But James wasn't the only one keeping secrets. Marissa started noticing small things, subtle changes that at first didn't seem significant. James had become more distant. He was coming home later and later, often claiming that work was piling up or that he had to attend last-minute meetings. His phone, which used to be open and accessible, was now locked, and he started to take calls in another room. She thought she was overthinking it, maybe even being paranoid. After all, he had always been so dependable. But the nagging feeling in her gut wouldn't go away. One evening, while James was out on another one of his business trips, Marissa decided to go through his things. It wasn't something she would have normally done, but the curiosity had gotten the better of her. She started with his office, looking through old papers and documents. But then she found something that made her heart drop. His phone. She hesitated for a moment, but the temptation was too strong. She unlocked it, carefully, almost as if she was committing a crime. What she saw made her stomach turn. There, in his messages, were texts to Olivia. Flirty texts, intimate texts, and messages that revealed something Marissa had never expected. Words that made her feel sick to her core. She scrolled through more messages, reading their conversations, their plans, their intimate exchanges. They had been seeing each other for months. The details, the way they spoke to each other, was everything James had never shared with her. Marissa's hands trembled as she read, each message confirming the reality she had feared but never wanted to face. She had been betrayed, not just with one night, but with months of secrecy, of lies. The man she had trusted, the one who had promised to love her forever, had been living a double life. The anger surged through her like a tidal wave, but it was nothing compared to the sadness that followed. She didn't know how to process it all. It wasn't just about the affair. It was the realization that everything she had believed in was a lie. The foundation of their marriage had been built on lies, on deception. She couldn't help but feel foolish, wondering how she had missed all the signs. But the truth was, she hadn't missed them. She just hadn't wanted to see them. Marissa confronted him that night. When he came home, she was waiting for him. His expression changed the moment he walked through the door, his eyes darting to her, already knowing that she knew. But he didn't say anything at first. He just stood there, his face pale, the weight of his guilt hanging in the air between them. "I know about Olivia," Marissa said, her voice shaking but firm. The words came out in a rush, like she couldn't hold them in any longer. "I know about everything." James stood there, silent for a long moment, before his shoulders slumped. The guilt in his eyes was undeniable. "I'm so sorry, Marissa," he whispered, but it sounded hollow. "I never meant for this to happen." "Never meant for it to happen?" Marissa's voice cracked as she stood up, her heart racing. "You've been seeing her for months, James. You've been lying to me for months. How could you do this? How could you do this to us?" James tried to reach out to her, but Marissa pulled away. She couldn't bear to be touched by him. The anger, the betrayal, everything was overwhelming her, and she needed space. She needed to understand why this had happened. "I don't know what to say," James said quietly. "I was stupid. I made a mistake, and now I don't know how to fix it." Fix it. The words felt like a slap in the face. How could he fix something so broken? How could he ever repair the trust that had been shattered into pieces? "I don't know if I can forgive you, James," Marissa said, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again." The silence that followed was deafening. Both of them stood there, lost in the realization of what had just occurred. The betrayal was out in the open now, and there was no going back. The life they had built was crumbling, and neither of them knew how to rebuild it. The damage had been done, and Marissa wasn't sure if it could ever be undone. The days after the confrontation were a blur of emotions. Marissa was torn between anger and heartbreak, and James was a shadow of the man he once was. He had always been the one to make her feel safe, secure. Now all she felt was betrayed. The love they had built over the years felt like a distant memory, something that no longer seemed real. The trust that once defined their marriage was gone, and with it, the foundation of their life together. James tried everything he could to fix things. He apologized repeatedly, begged for her forgiveness, promised he would do anything to make it right. But Marissa was broken. Every time he said, "I'm sorry," it felt like a hollow attempt to erase the hurt he had caused. His apologies didn't change the reality. He had betrayed her, and no matter how much he said he regretted it, that didn't make the pain go away. For the first time in their marriage, Marissa was unsure of what to do. She loved James, but love wasn't enough to fix the damage. Her trust in him had been shattered, and now she was left questioning everything. Was it possible to move forward with someone who had lied to her for so long? Could she rebuild what they had? Or was it beyond repair? The house felt different now. It wasn't just the physical space. It was the emotional weight that hung in every room. Every corner reminded her of the life they had built. a life that now felt like a lie. She couldn't even look at James without thinking of Olivia, of their betrayal. And James, for his part, was trying to be patient, trying to give her the space she needed to process everything. But the truth was, he didn't know how to fix it either. His actions had irrevocably changed everything, and he was realizing that love alone couldn't undo the damage he had caused. One evening, after a particularly painful conversation, Marissa took a long walk by herself. She needed to clear her mind, to get away from the suffocating weight of it all. She walked through the familiar streets, the ones they used to walk together hand in hand. But now everything felt different. Every step reminded her of how things used to be, before the lies, before the betrayal. It was then that she realized something. She couldn't live like this. She couldn't keep walking through life carrying the weight of his betrayal on her shoulders. She couldn't keep wondering if he was still lying, wondering if he was still hiding something from her. She had to make a decision. She had to decide whether she could move forward with him or if it was time to let go. That night, she came home, her mind clearer than it had been in days. James was sitting on the couch, waiting for her. He looked at her with those same apologetic eyes, but this time, Marissa didn't feel pity. She felt clarity. "I've been thinking," she said quietly as she stood in the doorway, her heart pounding in her chest. "And I've realized that I don't know if I can forgive you. I don't know if I can trust you again. But what I do know is that I can't live like this anymore." James looked at her, his eyes filled with guilt. "Marissa, I'll do anything. Please, just give me a chance." But Marissa shook her head. "I don't think you can fix this, James. I don't think we can fix this. I need to find myself again. I need to figure out what I want, without you, without all of this." James didn't say anything. He just nodded, a tear escaping down his cheek. Marissa's heart broke for him, but she knew it was the right decision. She needed to heal, to rediscover who she was outside of this marriage, outside of this betrayal. She had been so focused on their life together that she had lost sight of herself. It was time to find her way back. "I'm sorry," James whispered, his voice cracking. "I never meant to hurt you." "I know you didn't," Marissa said softly. "But you did. And now we both have to live with that." And just like that, Marissa made the decision to let go. It wasn't easy. It wasn't painless. But she knew that this was the only way forward. She couldn't keep living in the past, holding on to a love that had been broken. She had to rebuild her life, piece by piece, without him. She turned away, walking towards the door of their bedroom. The finality of it hit her like a wave, but it also gave her a sense of freedom. She wasn't sure what the future held, but she was no longer willing to stay in a relationship built on lies. The pain would take time to heal, but for the first time in days, she felt a sense of peace. She was letting go, and that was the first step toward healing. The days after her decision were difficult, but there was a sense of relief in the air. Marissa didn't have all the answers, and the healing process was far from over. But for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was finally in control of her own life. The weight of James's betrayal was still there, but it didn't define her anymore. She no longer needed to measure her worth against the lies he had told. She was learning to stand on her own, to discover who she was outside of their marriage. Marissa moved into a small apartment, far enough to feel like a fresh start, but close enough to her work and her friends. She wasn't sure what her next steps were, but the idea of having a space that was entirely hers gave her a sense of freedom she hadn't felt in years. It wasn't just the physical space that was important, it was the emotional distance she was starting to create. She needed to heal, to rebuild herself from the inside out, and that required space. Her friends were supportive, but they could see the toll the past months had taken on her. They listened when she needed to talk, but they also encouraged her to move forward, to stop looking back at the past and to start focusing on herself. You're strong, Marissa, they told her. You'll get through this. They reminded her of the person she was before James, before the betrayal. Slowly, she started to reconnect with the parts of herself she had neglected. She picked up old hobbies again, things she had once loved but abandoned: painting, yoga, even cooking. She went for long walks, spending time with herself, letting her mind wander to places it hadn't been in years. And for the first time in months, she started to feel like the woman she had been before James came into her life. She remembered her own strength, her own independence, and it gave her the confidence to keep moving forward. But the emotional scars James had left behind were not so easily erased. There were nights when the loneliness felt unbearable, when the silence in her apartment was deafening. There were moments when she missed the companionship, the intimacy, the comfort of being with someone who was supposed to love her. But as time passed, she learned to accept those moments for what they were, part of the healing process. James, for his part, tried to reach out, but Marissa had made it clear that she needed time, time to heal, time to find herself again. He would send occasional texts, asking how she was doing, apologizing once more for his actions. But Marissa didn't respond. She knew it wasn't healthy to continue holding on to the hope of reconciliation. She had made the decision to let go, and as painful as it was, she couldn't let him back into her life. One evening, a few weeks later, Marissa found herself sitting at a cafe, reflecting on how far she had come. She looked out the window, watching the world go by, and realized something. The pain she had felt, the heartbreak, the betrayal, was still there, but it no longer controlled her. It was a part of her story, a chapter in her life that she had to endure, but it didn't define her. She had grown stronger through the pain, and that strength was something no one could take away from her. As she sat there, sipping her coffee, her phone buzzed with a message from James. It was simple, just a text asking if she was okay. She stared at the screen for a moment, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. She wanted to respond, to tell him that she was healing, that she was moving on, but she didn't. Instead, she put her phone down and took another sip of her coffee. Marissa realized then that she no longer needed closure from James. The closure she was looking for wasn't something he could give her. It was something she had to find within herself. She had let go of the pain, the anger, and the resentment. She was starting fresh, and that was all that mattered. In the weeks that followed, Marissa continued to rebuild her life. She surrounded herself with people who supported her, people who reminded her of her worth. She focused on her career, her passions, and most importantly, on her own well-being. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, she felt hopeful. And as time passed, Marissa found peace, not with James, but with herself. She had come to terms with the betrayal, and in doing so, she had freed herself from the past. She wasn't defined by what happened to her, but by how she chose to move forward. The future was hers to create, and she was ready to embrace it. Months passed, and Marissa's life slowly but surely began to fall back into place. The wounds from James's betrayal, while still present, were no longer as raw. She had started to find peace in her own company, and with that peace came a new sense of confidence. She had grown stronger than she ever thought possible, and the clarity she now had made her realize something important. She didn't need anyone else to validate her worth. Marissa began to rebuild her life, brick by brick. She focused on her career, something that had always brought her joy but had taken a back seat during her marriage. She took on new projects at work and even started to think about the future in a way she hadn't allowed herself to before. She'd been so consumed by James and the relationship they had that she had neglected her own goals and dreams. Now she was determined to make them a reality. She also started dating again, not in the sense of jumping into a new relationship, but allowing herself to enjoy life and the people around her without the weight of her past holding her down. It wasn't about replacing James or trying to fill the void he left. It was about rediscovering herself and learning to trust again. She went on a few casual dates, but nothing ever quite felt right. She wasn't ready for something serious, and she wasn't sure if she ever would be. She didn't need a man to feel complete. She had learned that the hard way. It was one evening, as she sat at a small outdoor cafe with a friend, that she realized just how far she had come. She looked around at the bustling city, at the people moving through their lives, and for the first time in a long while, she felt truly at peace. She had been through the storm, and now she was standing in the calm. She had survived the betrayal, and in doing so, had discovered a strength she didn't know she had. Her phone buzzed, breaking her moment of reflection. It was a message from her friend Emily, asking if she wanted to meet up for a girls' night. Marissa smiled, her heart light. She replied quickly, agreeing to meet her in a couple of hours. As she put the phone down, she thought about the journey she had been on. The pain, the heartbreak, the betrayal. It all felt so distant now. She had come out the other side, stronger, wiser, and ready for whatever came next. She had let go of James and everything he had represented in her life. But more importantly, she had let go of the hurt. She had learned to forgive, not for him, but for herself. She realized that holding on to anger and resentment would only keep her stuck in the past. And she wasn't that person anymore. She was someone who was learning to trust herself, to trust her instincts, and to trust that she deserved happiness. Later that night, as she laughed with her friends and enjoyed their company, she felt a sense of freedom she hadn't felt in a long time. She was no longer defined by the betrayal that had shattered her world. She was no longer held captive by the past. The future was hers to create, and she was no longer afraid of what it might hold. There was a sense of possibility in the air, a sense of excitement about what came next. Marissa knew that she would always carry the scars of James's betrayal. Those wounds would always be a part of her story. But they no longer controlled her. She had taken back her power. She had learned that her worth wasn't dependent on anyone else's actions. Her worth came from within, and that was something no one could take away from her. As the night ended and Marissa walked home, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. She wasn't broken anymore. She was whole. She was strong. And whatever came next, she knew she was ready to face it. Because she was no longer afraid of being alone. She was learning to love herself, and that was all that mattered.